شام بخیر اور دا بلیک ہول میں آپ سب کو خوش آمدید. بادل ڈھل گئے ہیں اور ہوا میں ٹھنڈک تو ہے، لیکن بارش کی سرگوشیاں جو ہیں اب مدھم ہو گئی ہیں. تاہم یہاں کچھ ہی دیر میں ان لوگوں کی سرگوشیاں سنائی دینے کو ہیں جو دنیا یا کم از کم اس خطے یا پاکستان کی تاریخ بنانے یا یوں کہیں کہ بگاڑنے میں شریک رہے ہیں. یعنی آج ہم یہاں موجود ہیں ایک اہم اور ایک دلچسپ کتاب کی لانچنگ یا ڈسکشن کے لیے، جس کا عنوان آپ میری پشت پہ بورڈ پہ لکھا ہوا دیکھ سکتے ہیں، اے ڈائلاگ وتھ ہسٹری، انٹرویوز وتھ ورلڈ لیڈرس. یہ کتاب ہے 39 انٹرویوز کی کلیکشن پر مشتمل، جو کہ انفلوئنشل لیڈرز اور انفلوئنشل پرسنالٹیز کے ہیں جنہوں نے اپنی اپنی فیلڈ میں جو ہے کنٹریبیوٹ کیا ہے. اور امید ہے کہ اس کتاب سے ہمیں جو کنٹمپریری ہسٹری ہے اس کے مسنگ ڈاٹس کو سمجھنے میں مدد مل سکتی ہے. یہ کتاب ہے زاہد حسین صاحب کی محنت کا ثمر، جو میرے یہاں دائیں جانب تشریف فرما ہے اور خاص طور پہ ہمارے لیے تشریف لائے ہیں. آپ انہیں جانتے ہیں، آتھر ہیں، تجزیہ کار ہیں، کالمسٹ ہیں اور ایوارڈ وننگ جرنلسٹ ہیں. بائیں جانب میرے تشریف فرمائیں ڈاکٹر طارق بنوری صاحب، جو کہ اکانومسٹ ہیں اور ہائر ایجوکیشن کمیشن کے فارمر چیئرپرسن رہے ہیں. آج کے سیشن کی ماڈریشن اور بطور ڈسکسنٹ ہمیں جوائن کر رہے ہیں ڈاکٹر ناظر محمود صاحب. کالمسٹ ہیں، ایجوکیٹر ہیں، فلم کرٹک ہیں اور سوشو پولیٹیکل کمنٹیٹر ہیں. آپ لوگوں کی آمد کا بھی شکریہ. تھوڑی سی زحمت کر کے اپنے سیل فونس کائنڈلی سوئچ کر دیں ٹو سائلنٹ موڈ سو دیٹ دیر از نو ڈسٹریکشن. باہمی گفتگو کے بعد حسب روایت ہاؤس اوپن ہوتا ہے فار کیو اینڈ اے. آپ اس میں ضرور شریک ہوئیے گا. جب وہ مرحلہ آئے تو جسٹ ریز یور ہینڈ فرسٹ، تاکہ آپ کو یہ مائکروفون آپ کے سپرد کر دیا جائے، کیونکہ اس کے بنا آپ کی آواز نہ ریکارڈنگ میں آئے گی نہ آن لائن آڈینس تک جائے گی. تو اس کا کائنڈلی خیال رکھیے گا. اینڈ بس یہی تھا. پلیز ویلکم ڈاکٹر طارق بنوری، ڈاکٹر ناظر محمود اور آج کے ہمارے گیسٹ اسپیکر زاہد حسین صاحب.
Thank you very much, Nayyar. This is my privilege to be hosting this session today, and thank you very much for joining us this evening, rather misty evening. Zahid Saab has been active in journalism for over 40 years now, and he has been one of the most prolific columnists and writers. Only his output, if we just look at the last 5 years, almost every year he produces a new book, and each book is worth reading. So, of course, I could not bring all of his books, but here I would like to introduce at least 3 of his recent books. Hybrid Rule in Pakistan, it came out in 2022, and immediately after that, in 2023, Face to Face with Benazir, Zahid Hussain, you can see it here. And the latest book, we will spend most of our time today discussing this book. It's a collection of interviews of prominent personalities, national and international personalities. So thank you very much, Zahid Saab, for being with us today. And we also have Tariq Banori Saab, former chairman, Higher Education Commission, and a very active observer and commentator on national and international issues. This book, just to give a brief introduction, this book is a collection of interviews, and almost more than half of this book contains interviews with national personalities, Pakistani personalities, both politicians and human rights activists, and including even Imran Khan, who was not a politician at that time when he conducted his interview. Most of the interviews he conducted in his 1980s, but then there are interviews that he conducted in 1990s and even 2000 also. Yes, but most of the interviews were conducted in 1980s. So this is, there is in this type of books, there is a criticism also on journalists like himself, because many journalists just compile their columns. So one criticism is that the collection of column cannot be taken as a serious book. But I do not belong to that school of thought. I belong to a different, whether it is a collection of interviews or collection of columns, I think they provide us a very solid source of information and knowledge of that particular period. So I will start with Tariq Banoori Saab, if you are feeling well. Should I start with Zahid Saab? Okay. Zahid Saab, but before coming to the book, I think I would appreciate, our session will be bilingual, though the books are in English, but I would appreciate if we can, conduct in both Urdu and English. So, and when we come to question answer session also, just feel free to speak either in Urdu or English. So, Zahid Saab, before discussing the book, please tell us about yourself, because it will be our primary audience is online, and we have thousands of young viewers also, both nationally and internationally. And that will be, I think, very beneficial if you share with us your early experiences, how you landed in journalism, and when you look back at your career, how do you feel? Are there any regrets, or do you feel pride in what you have been doing, or do you think that there was something else that you should be doing? Please tell us something about yourself, about your early career, and how you started on this journey. Mic is there.
Thank you, Nadir, and thank you, Tariq. Thank you for coming despite your health problem. Well, actually, you are right. Actually, it's not. There are 3 books which you have just mentioned, are compilation of my interviews and my columns. But before that, I have written 3 books which you can call original. First was Frontline Pakistan, the struggle with militant Islam. The second was The Scorpion's Tail. And the third one was Novin War, the paradox of US-Pakistan relations under Afghanistan shadow. As far as my journalist career is concerned, it starts from one of the interviews which is part of this book, my book. It was way back in 1983. I was in London and some people, some Iranians, member of diaspora, asked me whether I would like to interview Bani Sadr and Masood Rajavi. Bani Sadr, as you would know, was the first elected president of Iran after the revolution. He was an intellectual, and he had, a year ago, he had fled from Iran. He was removed from the presidency by the supreme leader at that point, Khomeini. And so I was quite interested. I used to write off and on columns or in newspapers, but I was not really a journalist at that point. And that I went to Paris, interviewed Bani Sadr and Masood Rajavi, quite interesting personalities. And Bani Sadr, as I said, I have written his introduction in the interview, that he looked more like a professor than a revolutionary leader. He was part of the revolution with Khomeini, but as we all know, that some of the people who are part of the revolution become the first victim of revolution, and so was Bani Sadr and Rajavi. So that I sent that interview to Herald. Herald, if you remember, at that point I was just changing the format, and it was one of the foremost news magazine at that point. They published it, both interviews. They were very quite interested in that. And when I came back, Razia Bhatti was the editor of Herald, and she asked whether I would be interested in joining the magazine. I said that was my first job, and interestingly, I was the as they used to call me, token male of the staffer. Almost all other member of the editorial board were women. And that's how my career in journalism started. And during that period, most of the interviews which are the part of the book appeared in Herald. We used to have a column which called Personality Interview. And that allowed us to have a longish interviews with the people, politicians, as well as those who had been doing something in their field. And as you have seen, actually, most of the interviews in 80s were of those politicians, and also not just politicians, but also the people who had people of they have in their own field, they have a legendary figure in their fields, and like Mahbub-ul Haq, Dr. Nafis Sadiq, one of the most impressive women, who was head of UNFPA, most senior member of the Pakistani, most senior Pakistani to ever have that position, high position in the United Nations. So that's how I interviewed her in Mexico during this population summit. So that was my journey to journalism. And until 1988, I was with Herald, 89. And during that period, there was so much was happening. Pakistan was in the news. So during that period, I was also offered to be the correspondent for Times London for Pakistan and Afghanistan. So during that period, I also joined London Times as Pakistan and Afghanistan crowd way back in 1986. That's how actually my journey to journalism started. Then when we all left Herald, I think in 89 when Razia Bhatti was forced to resign, and then we took out our own magazine. That was the first journalist venture in Pakistan history, so that there was no owner as such. It was a kind of, we were all owners. And that's how Newsline started. So quite a lot of interviews in this book appeared in Newsline.
Thank you very much, Aisa, for giving a brief overview of your early career. Now, may I come to you then, Panoori Saab? Panoori Saab is slightly indisposed today.
Yeah, my apologies.
So I think, first of all, let's have a general overview rather than going into specifics. Would you please give us your general impressions about this book, how you found it?
Thank you. I was hoping that Zahid would give us a little bit of that. But I thought, when I read the book, I thought the proper subtitle would have been, How Should Pakistan Be Governed? Because all but a few interviews, and the few meaning one on cricket, one on population, which were kind of, and even the international ones really had, some relevance to how should Pakistan be governed. But certainly all the political interviews really have this fundamental question before us. How should Pakistan be governed? And people are trying to deal with it in a number of ways. Now, that, of course, is not surprising because that is also the subtitle of Zahid Hussain biography, writing about how should Pakistan be governed. Because a lot of your books deal specifically with this issue. So when I read the interviews, so you look at the different people who are writing, the majority of them, I think, now I may be wrong, I didn't do a count, but they were in opposition when they were interviewed. And so they were speaking from a perspective of, not only of opposition, from the perspective of the people rather than the elite. Right? When you're in a part of the state, then you tend to speak on behalf of the kind of the magisterial authority. But when you're on the other side, you speak more from a popular. So there's a kind of a popular perspective. And so I felt that the first part of it was mainly politicians, mainly opposition politicians. One exception is Musharraf. Another exception is Imran Khan, who spoke as a cricketer, not as a politician. And in fact, that interview, I think, didn't even belong there because it sort of sticks out as dealing with a completely, everybody is talking about the same thing. How should Pakistan be governed? And here is one interview which kind of is on the side. So there's one group of interviews which deal with this, and I'll have a little bit to say on this. And then there's another group of interviews which is really about people who, as Zahid said, have done something significant, but they have also have done something significant about people's rights in some respect. Asma Jahangir, protect human rights. Akhtar Hamid Khan, eradicate poverty. Mahbub ul Haq, human development. Khalid Isaaq is really about Islamic economics, but Islamization. But again, you can say that they're talking about some goal and say, okay, how should this be there? And then, of course, there were the international ones, which have a, little bit of a tangential relationship. So this, I think, is a kind of and the sense that I got. The second part of it is that, these are all interviews conducted in the 1980s and maybe a little bit later. So it's almost like 1.5 generations ago, right? 2 generations ago almost. There's a phrase that the historian E.P. Thompson uses. He uses the phrase, the enormous condescension of history. The enormous condescension of history. Right? When you look back and people are talking about it, oftentimes you have the tendency to say, were they stupid? Why were they talking about these things? Because, 50 years have passed, and you kind of look and say, well, maybe they should know better. If they're saying, do this, we know that we did this and nothing happened. But they were talking about these things. So there's a kind of a condescension in history. We look back, and we tend to think they were children. They didn't know what they were doing. We know what we are doing. In this case, it doesn't hold. Because when you read it, you're amazed that 45 years later, we are still stuck at the same point. Right? There is no difference. Yesterday and day before yesterday, the three of us were at this group. A number of political opposition parties were talking about various issues. And I think I was quite struck by the similarities between what they were saying and what the National Democratic Movement, which Zahid writes about in his thing, that, somehow or the other, so much time has passed and we haven't really been able to move forward. And that's a puzzle. So that's my second comment is this, that, time has passed. You expect, when you read something old, you expect it to be old, but it's not old because we are still stuck in the same place. I mean, it is probably old, but we have become older. The third thing is that even when people think in terms of how should Pakistan be governed, it's really, a lot of it is about protecting myself. This is what happened to me. This should not happen to me. And in some sense, extrapolating from one's own experience. And opposition, one tends to do it. So there's a lot of experience about, people brought huge understanding of the national and global political events. But when they were talking about, look, this government did this, I was in jail for so many years, this is what I said, or this is how I behaved, and these are the things that happened. So there's almost a very personal aspect to it. And so what I came away was that there is a kind of not only an oppositional narrative, but a narrative that is focused much more on, in some sense, the political games that people play, to criticize those political games. There's a very clear narrative which is in favor of democracy. There's a very clear narrative, because they're mainly political leaders, which is critical of military rule, and a very clear narrative which is about the rights of people. But a lot of it is very, very personalized. So that's the third thing that I felt from it. The fourth issue, which is a little bit difficult to articulate, is that, these are all towering figures. You have Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, you have Wali Khan, you have Bizenjo. I mean, really people that we have come to remember with great respect and admiration, people who have been kind of giants in this field. But, and obviously these are snapshots. But the interesting thing that I found is that the emphasis really was less on rights and more on structure. Right? So when people talk about democracy, it's really about democracy as a process rather than democracy as a means of protection of people's rights. And this distinction, in my mind, certainly it's a very important distinction. And I felt that there was a kind of a leaning in the interviews, and perhaps Zahid can sort of reflect on this. Maybe he'll disagree with me, and I'd like to hear more about it. I have a couple of other comments to make, but I want to stop at this point and leave some of these thoughts with you.
Thank you, Banuri Sahib. You very succinctly, in one sentence, summarized the book. This is about how Pakistan should be governed, or how Pakistan should not be governed, rather. Well, I think for young generation, sources of history are various. One is that students read in so-called Pakistani studies textbooks, which are mostly pack of lies, mostly. Then, other than that, you have biographies. But interestingly, most of the biographies that we have are from civil and military bureaucrats. And those biographies, through those biographies, autobiographies, they try to whitewash their own past. And like Ruedat Khan's biography and Lieutenant General so-and-so's biography. In those biographies, they, on and off, after every few pages, they say, I mentioned this, I tried to stop this, but they wouldn't listen to me. This was happening in 1971, this was happening, and I was Lieutenant General, and I told Yahya Khan not to do it, but he wouldn't listen. But I continued in my job. So that is, through these autobiographies, for young generation, it becomes very difficult who to believe and who not to believe. Then the third source is, as journalists write columns, their collection of columns, and probably the most authentic is alternative voices. So through these interviews from Zahid Saab's book, what we see, it contains interviews from politicians who were very active at that time. And in the words of, for example, Bizenjo's interview, Zahid Saab, in the introduction to Ghazbakhsh Bizenjo's interview, he quotes Selig Harrison, who said that about Ghazbakhsh Bizenjo, that he was perhaps one of the ablest or most able politicians in Pakistan, and he should have had a place in Islamabad to make decisions. I mean, this is a comment coming from Selig Harrison that shows that. And then other interviews, like interview with Bacha Khan, interview with Wali Khan, interview with Bizenjo, interview with so many other people on both sides, center left and center right. So when we read these interviews, we get to know what alternative voices were there. And when we look at the mess that Pakistan is in right now, and some people say that we don't know and we don't understand what happened to this country, you read these interviews and you see that there were politicians who were pointing out the right direction and who were telling the powers that be not to do this or that, but they wouldn't listen. And 1980s is probably the best example in which Pakistan was being thrown into that Afghan war, and people like Bizenjo and Wali Khan and Bacha Khan and others, they were clearly saying and indicating that don't throw Pakistan into that. This will ultimately burn Pakistan itself. But the powers that be wouldn't listen. Anyway, Zahid Saab, coming to you, please tell us about. There are around 40 interviews in this. Tell us about the most challenging interview that you have had.
I think you are right, Tarek, that most of the interviews were conducted when they were in opposition. But quite a lot of them also been in power. So obviously, when they were speaking out, it was also a voice of opposition. And I think that was the purpose also, because when you many interviews, I'm not saying the most of the interviews, because I've also lots of interviews were in 1990s and also until 2004. But it is, if you that was a period when we had a military government, a Zia's government, and when I joined the journalism, it was 1984, the peak of General Zia-ul-Haq's rule. And the main purpose of these interviews were to bring bring out the voices of the people who were against the military government. Obviously, that was one of the main purpose of that. There should be because the government version was all there. You don't need to interview any one of them because the paper, the newspapers and the TV channel, used to be only one TV channel, PTV, was full of them. So I think that was the, and I think if you see some of them, they have left a huge legacy, or they have a huge impact on Pakistan political struggle throughout. Like, for example, Bacha Khan, who had never been in power. But I think probably, if you ask me, who was the most impressive leader, in my view, it was Ghaffar Khan. Not that I'm leave aside actually whatever his political views, but one thing about that person, I met him when he was 1990. He was I think probably 95 year old. And I remember actually I wanted to interview him for long, and so I heard that he was in Bannu. So I flew from Karachi. I used to live in Karachi at that point, and went to Bannu. And I remember that it was a very modest house right in the center of Bannu city. And I was waiting for him. He had gone to address some rallies on Kalabagh Dam. So he came around 9:30, and he was lifted by one of his workers and brought to the bed. And he was in a very bad shape, obviously tired, exhausted. So I told him that I have come just to interview him. I was not sure that even tomorrow, day after, he would be able to speak. So he said, "Come tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock." I said, "My God, actually, in this condition, whether he would be able to wake up." So when I went there, he was all there and having his morning tea. And he spoke to me about 2 hours, and it was piece of history. And what impressed me more, because he had been a kind of, throughout his life, he was on the other side, he was out of power, and he had already spent 30 years in jail, and most of them during the colonial period. And so he was not just a kind of run-of-the-mill type of political leaders who would just talk about himself or about his sacrifices. What impressed me about his dedication to the people, to the Pashtun population, and that was actually was a huge difference between him and other political leaders. His contribution to Pashtun society was massive. He was a reformist also. He was not just actually a kind of fighter for political cause. But and so that was the most interesting interview, I must say. Then obviously Bisinjo, I think I found him very astute politician. And Sileg Harrison, you have just mentioned, he was right actually, because he belonged to Balochistan, and so obviously he could not become the national leader that way, but he had been the governor of his province for a brief period of time. But he was different. He was, if you read his interview, it brings out the kind of person he was. He was a visionary. He was a kind of statesman, which we hardly find this kind of quality among the current political leadership, particularly. So, some of the things which he said was prophetic. He pointed out what were the problems. And you're right, actually, most of the interviews were like this, actually, that this is happening and what should have been happened. But if you see, actually, all those things has been the major fault lines of Pakistan. He's speaking about, democracy, about, civilian military relationship, the domination of military, and also the rights of people. It's not just about themselves, but they were also speaking Bizinjo and particularly Ghaffar Khan and others too. So that way, you're right, actually 45 it's almost 45 years now. Some of the interviews, Bacha Khan's interview appeared in 1985, Bizinjo around the same period. But has Pakistan changed? Like, for example, that day before yesterday, when we were there, they were all talking about the same problems: civil and military relationship, democracy, and also the external problems, challenges faced by Pakistan. So that way, which is quite interesting, that we have been moving in cycles. And same problems coming up, and so we have not gotten out of it. The countries or nations have problems, but there's always actually few years later, or maybe a decade or 2 decades, they come out for that and they move forward. But Pakistan's problem is very clearly evident in this interview, that we have not gone anywhere. In fact, actually, if I could say that there has been regression rather than actually going in politics and everything. But other interviews were also quite interesting. It was not the 2 or 3 interviews also when people were in power. One was General Musharraf. I remember actually it was, I think, I was in Cambridge University doing my fellowship. So I was also Times correspondent, but I flew just to interview him about a week after he took over. And we spent a lot of time. I think probably it was the first comprehensive interview by him after taking over. And that actually brought the person he was. And I would compare it, he was all confident, but certainly he was not aware about the challenges which lie ahead and things. So quite, but one thing I found him actually leave aside his politics, leave aside he was a military ruler, but basically he appeared to me very different from other political leaders who would be in power. And that, and then obviously I interviewed him again actually in 2002. So that was the first interview. That was quite interesting that he came to power, but obviously internationally he was seen as a pariah. The international community or countries have not accepted the military takeover. That was something. But when I met him 2002, one could see the change. This interview came, I think, months after 9/11, and it changed the whole thing. He was from a pariah. He was a kind of a global stage, and the confidence about things. So it was all there. So I could see the evolution of leader. Then I met him several times after he left power and other things. So one could also see how this, the thinking or a person's own evolution. So when I met him last time, when he was in power, just 3 months before he stepped down. It is not part of the book, but obviously you could see the person. And I was comparing him when 99 and then to. So that was, but also the other very interesting, the other side, who is there are many other characters or politicians who are still there. like for example, Nawaz Sharif, there's an interview, Asif Zardari. He was not in power, but outside power. And so many others actually. So, but the most interesting interview was with Nawaz Sharif, actually. Now, I could never imagine, actually. Like my first introduction to him, he was Chief Minister of Punjab way back in 1988. That was, and soon after, just before the elections, 98 election, Zia has died. And I remember actually I was doing a documentary on Pakistan's politics for BBC. And so for 2 minutes comments, it took us about 6 hours to record it. And so a few months after the elections, he was still the chief minister because there was no concept of caretaker at that point. So when I went to see him, it was all on to that. It was still not decided whether Benazir or Nawaz Sharif will be the prime minister. So I could not believe his principal advisor was Hussain Haqqani at that point, and he left Nawaz Sharif with me, and I could see the person was very nervous. And I first asked him whether he would like to stay in Punjab or opt for Central, because it was very much possibility that he could be named as Prime Minister. So he would say, tell me, what should I do? So most of the question he would ask me actually, what should I do? Hold my hand. So that was, and then I interviewed him later too. There was some evolution, but certainly I never found him very impressive. And so all is my Asif Zardari, basically, when I interviewed him, Benazir's government was ousted. I think a few months after that, the cases were there, and he was also a candidate for National Assembly seat from Nawabshah. It was his first time he was contesting election, and I had written a very scathing article about him a few weeks ago in Newsline, Take the Money and Run, about all his scandals. And I asked him all the tough questions, but he came out very, he was not defensive at all. And I could see after that actually, and one thing I remember later on other interview, that he always was confident that either he would be in jail or in the Prime Minister or President's house, and he proved right. So that's how I see actually quite a lot of. So it's again actually like, and there are also some other interviews which I really remember and really remarkable, like Dr. Mubashir Hassan, one of the founder members of the Pakistan People's Party, and that interview. That was a very frank, and if you read it, it tells all about actually what went wrong with the People's Party or the Mr. Bhutto's government. He was very frank. He was not actually, as I said, I am the people. The title of the interview is I am the People's Party. I am the PPP. But it is very, it also shows what was really. One incident I remember is that when he went to see Mr. Bhutto, Mr. Bhutto was still the Prime Minister. It was, I think, a few months before he decided to hold election. And he was engineer by profession, in fact. So he said, I'd pick up the phone. And then he said, I opened it, and there was some instrument there. So I said, do you know what is this? It's a bugging. And so then he called his, I think, Murtaza, to find out. Nusrat Bhutto. So they said, yeah, we all have this kind of thing, is bugging it. So Bhutto said, my God, they are bugging my phone as well. So that, so in that way, actually, if you go through that, you can get a lot of, things, actually, what really went wrong with Pakistan and what has been happening in the country.
Very interestingly, about PP's government, he interviews at least 3 persons, Mumtaz Bhutto, and Mubashir Hassan, and then Makhdoom Talibul Maula, Makhdoom Talibul Maula. Very interesting interviews, I must say. And regarding multiple interviews of Nawaz Sharif, interestingly, when Zahid Saab interviewed him for the first time in 1988, Zahid Saab comments that, he lacked confidence. Nawaz Sharif lacked confidence. Then he interviewed him again in 1989. And Zahid Saab comments that now he was more confident, but still lacked depth. And then he interviewed him in 1994, and Zahid Saab comments, now he was even more confident, but still lacked depth. So there are some very interesting quips that he, makes, Zahid Saab. So that makes this book even more interesting to read. The flow of the interview is very. Once you start it, you keep going. Bhanori Saab, you talked about governance, and in these, of course, you have read the book, and the book contains interviews, as I said, of politicians who belong to center left, like I'm not saying right and left, but center left and center right. Center left like Bacha Khan, Bizinjo, Jam Saki, Rasul Bakhsh Palijo, and many others. And then there are center right, like Professor Ghafoor's interview is there, and then Fakhar Imam's interview is there, and Nawaz Sharif's interview is there. And all of them are suggesting things to improve governance. And since you are a governance specialist and you have read both center-right interviews and center-left interviews contained in this book, what is your take if I ask you to make a comparison of the suggestions that they make, how relevant they were, and do they have any relevance today?
Thank you. Let me say a couple of things. One of them, before I answer your question, in Bacha Khan's interview, I think the statement he makes, which I thought was very interesting, he says, I'm not a politician, my son is a politician. Wali Khan, I'm a reformer, right? And that was, it's consistent throughout the interview. He presents himself as a reformer, and he basically says there were problems with the Pashtun society, and my whatever motivation was to help improve. So improve education, improve understanding, improve the rights of women. So it's a kind of a broader agenda. So I would say, and this links it to the other question that Nazir asked. So I would put some of the interviews in the category of, okay, here is a kind of a broad strategic framework. Not a framework, but kind of a goal. Excuse me. And I would say that Bacha Khan's interview had elements of that, because he was really talking about how to reform society. I felt that Mubashir's interview had that as well, because Mubashir really, consistent throughout the interview, is this idea of the socialist, that we have to build a socialist economy, a socialist society. This is what we were trying to do. We started deviating from it. We gave up our agenda. And there were some elements of it in which he was kind of regretting some of the things that hadn't happened. And I mean, I have differences with them, but let me just state that. So, and of course, the non-politicians, Mahbub and Asma, Khalid Ishaq and Akhtar Hamid Khan, they were really talking about a larger agenda. They were all reformists. And so they were talking about the reform agenda. The problem that I felt is that when I look at the others, it was a very tactical trench warfare. This is what happened. This either should not have happened. This is what I should have done. I mean, of course, the extreme example is Zardari, because Zardari, really, there's no content. I mean, it's really, yeah, they accuse me of being Mr. 10%. I'm not. What have I done? Why are you after me? The Prime Minister's husband is a very difficult position. I mean, look at me. I'm trying to define. I mean, it's a very, very tactical kind of, almost a hand-to-hand combat. So what I was trying to read through all of this is that is it possible for us to take all of this and to say that our great minds have given us a legacy to tell us how should the country be ideally be governed. And I felt that there's a lot of tactics, but there's very little on strategy. And it's not a criticism of you, it's not a criticism of them, because they were fighting the battles they were fighting. But certainly I did not come away thinking, oh my God, this is the framework. This is how we should do things, right? There's a lot of oppositional sentiment, like, there's something wrong. And we also know, by the way, that much of that oppositional sentiment, look, this is what happened to me, that if they came into power, they would do it to you, right? And we I won't take any names, but that, the same person in opposition would say that this is wrong, but when they're in power, they will do exactly the same thing. So I did not get a sense that there is a framework. Now, this is my second point, and Nazir knows this, and I said it the other way also. The other day, we were talking about the Constitution. And I have, people have their own take on it. My take on the Constitution, which is really about how a country should be governed, is very simply this, that a Constitution is simply a means of protecting people against the malice of the state. We know that the state is very powerful. We also know that the rich and the powerful will have some control over it, and we want to protect people against it. Right? So my view is that that's the beating heart of every constitution, is this: how to protect people, not only from each other, but how to protect people ultimately from the might of the state, which is, we remember the times when the king could look at you, I don't like your face, off with his head. Right? Those were, history tells us these are kind of things. Throw him under an elephant and let this person be rolled over, and nothing could be done. But in the 20th century, we've come up with constitution after constitution. The beating heart of every constitution is the state has the tendency to become a highly malicious entity, and how to protect people against it. And I felt that there were lots of talk about how I would like to be protected, but not a lot of talk about how to protect people against it. And this is so you say that the beating heart is this: how to protect people against the state, and then a lot of the constitutions or the frameworks are really about the structure that you build on it. So there's a lot of things about the structure: elections, judiciary, police. These are the kind of things. That's the structure. But ultimately, the rights, I want people to talk about it. And I feel that this kind of a framing was kind of missing. It was too tactical. Now, again, it's not a criticism. It's just that that's what it is. And if a student were to read this, they would get a lot of understanding of not only what people were going through, but also what we are going through today. But I think they would still have to bring their own thinking about then what else should we do? And I don't see that. Okay, that's my general interest.
Thank you. Before I forget, I must promote the books which are here. Please don't forget to buy your copy. A couple of ₹1,000, some of you will say, a couple of ₹1,000 is too much. But I often remind that, we don't care when we spend a couple of ₹1,000 on pizzas. So a large pizza is ₹2,000 to ₹3,000, which we easily spend and don't regret. But when it comes to books, it sounds too much. So please don't feel that. And before leaving, you purchase your copy. Before I put the last question to Zahid Saab, and then we open the floor for questions and answers. Zahid Saab, we have talked a lot about this book and we have praised this book, but a couple of comments about its selection of interviews and thinking about reducing the bulk of this book. Over 600 pages, and when I read this book, I thought that there were some interviews which could have been easily either omitted or drastically edited. And why? I just want to know about why you selected some of the interviews which have practically no worth. For example, he mentioned Asif Ali Zardari's interview. It has no content, though later on he became president of Pakistan, but probably a later interview would have been included. Similarly, Imran Khan's interview, which just has focus on cricket of that time, which practically gives no information and no guidance about today's. The most of the interview is about, why you selected Wasim Akram, and he says this and that. So when I read this interview, I said, this interview could have been easily omitted because it has no content. So my question to you is why that proper editing was not done so that the bulk of this book could have been reduced, and rather than 600 pages, it could have been completed in, let's say, 450 pages.
Well, yes, you can say that some of the interviews do not go with the book and the purpose. But the purpose of this book, or basically those interviews, were personality interviews. It was not supposed to be, just question and answer that way. It was supposed to be bring out what was the thinking of that particular person who was being interviewed. And that was, I think for Imran Khan, yes, actually it looks odd, completely odd actually in this book. But sometime actually you have to give in to your publishers.
Sell the book, I mean, come on.
So I'm not saying that it was, I would have dropped it, yes. But basically, because people expected that Imran Khan's interview should be there. I've spoken to him later on, much more, but I've only included those interviews which are long interviews and talking about issues. Yeah, you can say that some of the interviews could be dropped, but the purpose was that even those people who were in different fields, to bring out what was their thinking, and when you talk, Tariq, you're right, actually technical, but it's also give a kind of understanding of what was happening at that point. When in most of the interviews, you were right, actually, when they were in opposition, but also actually it brings out the whole period where there were resistance was going on, there was struggle. You can say that there was no vision of what they wanted to do, but basically it says a lot about Pakistani politics also. That if each one was actually, if you see, like for example, Bazinjo, when I interviewed him, he had just came out from jail for several years. Same thing can be about Ghaffar Khan, about Wali Khan, Mubashir Hassan. He was one. So they were just pointing out what has gone wrong with it. But you would also this also brings forth that it was a period of high resistance. So don't forget about when you see that interviews were conducted mostly in 80s. That was a period of martial law. That was a period of the worst kind of authoritarian regime we had. So obviously the people were talking about what was going wrong, and how it is not like just they were talking about what has gone wrong, but some of them have also suggested what should be done. And those people, particularly if you see, like for example, J.M. Sayyed or Rasul Bakhsh Talpur, they were quite well-known leaders, nationalist leader. So if like for example, from Ghaffar Khan to J.M. Sayyed, Rasul Bakhsh Talpur, you could see the perspective of different areas also, and what was what was going on there, the contradictions within the society. So I think probably that was also a kind of tells you the history of this country and how political history of this country. Well, as far as the like for example, our purpose was at that point, I'm not talking about when I was compiling all those interviews, but the purpose of those interviews was to bring also, to give place or to give space or talk to those people who were not in power. They were not in power politics, but they had their contribution to Pakistani society and for democratic strength was massive. And nobody talks about them. Like, for example, Jam Saqi. Very few people know but people who know the Pakistani struggle of the working class. He suffered jail for about 10, 15 years. And I knew him personally also. Same thing, Mehraj Mohammad Khan. Rasool Baksh Palijo, for his own, leave aside the political views, but basically these are people who really struggled. And that was Pakistan. It was my purpose was, at that point, our purpose was not to just interview the people who were in power, but also mainly the focus was to give space or to talk to those people who had who had contributed massively into the democratic struggle, and particularly against the military rules. It was not so easy at that point. During martial law, all those meetings, but as far as I think those interviews were not has not been included in this book, but there's another book, Face to Face with Benazir. I separated it, and it is about 14 long interviews, and with the background which was happening at that point of time. So I think, leave aside, I said people may have differences with politics, but one thing I've seen actually, a leader who she was, as I was telling you, that one could engage with her and would be critical. I was very critical of her policy, but one thing actually I admire her, that her capacity to intellectually engage with you and argue with you. And so if you see actually her first interview with 86, and that was when she came back to Pakistan, she had suffered a long period of jail, exile. But, and the hindsight, I may not have noticed at that point, but if she's 32-year-old, but the maturity of her thinking, I can't believe actually any other Pakistani political leader had that. And similarly, if you could see the 14 interview up to 2004, I interviewed her later on also, but I did not include it because it was not in a question-answer form. But you could see the evolution of political leader. It was not just a stagnant thinking. So maybe actually because one could, it is not a part, but when you, through these leaders, I really believe actually, even if when I was, and I've forgotten many of the interviews, when after 40 years, when I was, compiling them and then revisited those interviews, then I really actually, I also learned a lot.
Thank you, Zahid Saab. Two more interviews that I would strongly recommend to read. One with Fakhr Imam and the other is with Junejo, Muhammad Khan Junejo. And it contains some very interesting incidents, and and Hamida Khodo's interviews was also good. Pir Ali Muhammad Rashdi's interview, very interesting. Pir Ali Muhammad Rashdi is an ideal case where, he was supposedly an intellectual, and the negative role he played in supporting one unit at that time and after that, and then the credit he used to get for, he tried to get for even Pakistan resolution, and very, very full of information, though he contradicted himself also, and he was one of those who promoted kingdom in Pakistan. He wrote a letter to Ayub Khan saying that Pakistan is suitable for monarchy, and Ayub Khan should declare himself king. And then initially responding to one question, he promotes kingdom, and he says Pakistan is not suitable for democracy. And in the same interview, after two questions, he says, well, I mean constitutional monarchy like in England. What contradiction. So, but very, very interesting. So, and he was an intellectual. So those who think that every intellectual is sensible probably is not true. And interview with Fakhr Imam, I like the incident in which you ask him about the election of Speaker of the Assembly. when after 1984 election, when the new assembly, non-party assembly came into being, the favorite candidate was Khaja Safdar. And Khaja Safdar was the chairman of the previous Majlis Shura, which was an selected body by General Zia-ul-Haq. So General Zia-ul-Haq thought that Khaja Safdar, as a candidate of the new assembly speaker, would automatically win. But that was the first defeat, because that didn't happen. And suddenly, overnight, kind of an opposing group or differing group emerged, which persuaded Fakhr Imam to run for speakership. And interestingly, Fakhr Imam defeated Zia-ul-Haq's favorite candidate, right after the formation of the new assembly. So there are numerous such incidences. And with Junaid's interviews also, Zahid Saab asked very incisive questions about why he was removed, about Geneva Accord, and about OGD Camp Blast and its report, investigation report, very, very informative reports. So now here we open floor for question and answer. Would you like to add something? Please do. Please use this.
Actually, he was one of the shrewdest politicians we have seen.
Yes.
He was advisor to Ali Muhammad Rashidi. And yes, you're right, actually, he suggested Ayub Khan that Ayub Khan should become the king of Pakistan. And then he was opposed. He was on the opposite side, or opposing Mr. Bhutto when 1970 election. And in fact, actually, he stood against People's Party candidate. He lost the election. But soon after, he became a close advisor of Mr. Bhutto. So that what is, and also one has to, the context of those interviews. Like, for example, you Fakhr Imam, for example, it was not just because Fakhr Imam, whatever he seems to be now, but basically it was a context. When Ayub Khan held election in 1985, it was because of the pressure, because of the MRD movement. He was forced to hold election in 1985. And it was party-less election, and he thought that he could control the whole system, and it will give him some kind of democratic legitimacy also. But the whole thing, if you see, the 1985 assembly was one of the most vibrant parliament we have seen in Pakistan history, because it was a kind of reaction. And he held election, and thinking that obviously because non-party People's Party was out from the election, but still people, his main candidates were defeated in the election. Raja Zafrullah, who was supposed to be opening, and lots of people who were part of General Zia's government lost the election, were defeated. And the assembly seat, I think they came to being. He picked up a completely, unknown politician from Sindh, because there was some kind of compulsion that the Prime Minister has to come from Sindh. So he picked Muhammad Khan Junaid. And I must say that he proved to be one of the most effective Prime Minister we had over the years. And in fact, actually, he forced Zia-ul-Haq to, first, when the assembly met, so obviously they wanted to, legitimize all those actions taken by the military government. So Junaid put one condition, that the parliament would do it after you have lifted martial law. And then obviously whatever happened is the part of the history. Fakhr Imam defeated Khwaja Safdar because Safdar was the candidate of General Zia-ul-Haq.
Thank you. Now floor is open for question and answers. It's bilingual. You can ask your question in English or Urdu, as you like. And welcome Faratullah Babar Saab. Shukriya aapke aane ka.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर मेरा क्वेश्चन राजीव गांधी के इंटरव्यू के हवाले से, जो आपने शायद 89 में जब वो आए थे सार्क की समिट पे तब किया था। सर उस वक्त क्या सेंटीमेंट था, मतलब साउथ एशिया में पीस प्रोस्पेक्ट्स के हवाले से, मतलब وہ آئے بھی تھے یہاں پر، مگر اس ٹائم بہت زیادہ چیزیں بھی ہو رہی تھیں، مطلب کشمیر میں پھر ملیٹنسی بھی آ گئی، بہت زیادہ ایشوز بھی آ گئے. تو مطلب وہ کیا ایسی چیزیں ہوئیں جن کی وجہ سے مطلب گیٹ along نہیں کر سکے ہم انڈیا اور پاکستان دونوں؟
And it was a really interesting interview. Rajiv Gandhi had come to attend SARC conference, SARC summit. I think probably it was the end of '88, a few weeks rather, after Benazir was elected prime minister. And it was a different kind of atmosphere. There was a lot of hope, and it was very interesting to speak to Rajiv Gandhi. He was also accidental leader, that way one could say that. And he was not really that kind of, really in command of the situation. So when I interviewed him on the record, so he would look all the time to his principal secretary, who was sitting with his Parthasarathi, who had been High Commissioner of Pakistan earlier. And he was very cautious on what I say. But as soon as I finished my formal interviews, he came to life, and then he started talking a lot about. He was so curious to know about Benazir Bhutto. He was really fascinated by her, and obviously that was a time that for the first time Pakistan had the leaders, two leaders, post-partition, were born post-partition. There was a lot of hope, but and I think probably they reached some agreement also, like Siachen. But when we talk about our establishment, there was an Indian establishment also. So when he went back, nothing happened on that. But there was a lot of hope. The environment has changed. But basically it also, Benazir had to pay a lot actually after, because I remember then the ISI came and launched some kind of campaign that she wanted to have good relations or whatever actually. Lots of things which came up. I think that is the way. We could see that some people were not very happy that things should improve.
ویری انٹرسٹنگ. میں آپ کی سوال آپ کا بڑا انٹرسٹنگ ہے, اور جو ایک دو چیزیں میرے ذہن میں آ رہی ہیں وہ میں آپ سے شیئر کروں, کیونکہ مجھے بالکل اچھی طرح یاد ہے کہ وہ کیا ہوا کیا تھا اس وقت, کیونکہ میں آئی واز جسٹ 24 ایئر اولڈ ایٹ دیٹ ٹائم. میں جنگ اخبار کے لیے میں نے نیا لکھنا شروع کیا تھا. نومبر 88 میں الیکشن ہوئے. میرا خیال ہے بی بی نے 2 دسمبر کو حلف اٹھایا تھا 88 میں, اور آئی کین ریمبر دا یوفوریا وی پیپل لائک اس ہیڈ کہ بھائی ریسٹوریشن آف ڈیموکریسی, دیٹ مانسٹر آف ضیاء الحق از گون. اور یہ جو سارک کی میٹنگ تھی, بی بی نے فرسٹ ویک آف دسمبر میں حلف اٹھایا. یہ سارک کی میٹنگ ہونی تھی لاسٹ ویک آف دسمبر میں, اینڈ اٹ واز پری پلانڈ. یہ کوئی بی بی کے آنے کے بعد نہیں تھی. اگر بی بی الیکشن میں نہیں ہوتی, کوئی اور پرائم منسٹر ہو تو اس کو بھی یہ کرنا پڑتا. لیکن اس دوران میں ہوا کیا تھا, 2-3 چیزیں ذہن میں رکھنے کی ہیں. ایک تو یہ کہ بی بی کے آنے سے پہلے آئی جی آئی بنا دیا گیا تھا. جو رائٹسٹ فورسز تھے, آئی ایس آئی, حمید گل اس میں بڑا ایکٹیو تھا. اختر عبد الرحمان مر چکا تھا. حمید گل جو ہے وہ آئی ایس آئی کے چیف تھے. ان لوگوں نے کیا کیا تھا, آئی جی آئی بنا کر نواز شریف کو انسٹال کر دیا ایز چیف منسٹر پنجاب میں, اور انہوں نے سارک کانفرنس کو استعمال کیا بی بی کے خلاف. اور پورا رائٹ ونگ کا جو پریس تھا, جس میں مجیب الرحمان شامی جیسے لوگ, ان کا رسالہ زندگی نکلتا تھا, جو اس وقت لکھنے والے تھے, جماعت اسلامی, تکبیر کا مجھے یاد ہے پورا ایک کور اسٹوری تھی جس میں سارک کانفرنس کو کہا گیا تھا شارک کانفرنس. شارک کانفرنس یہ پاکستان کو نگل جائے گی, اور وہ میں نے تکبیر کا شمارہ رکھا ہوا بھی تھا میرے پاس, شاید ابھی بھی کراچی میں رکھا ہوا ہوگا. تو اس طرح سے جو اسٹیبلشمنٹ اور رائٹسٹ فورسز تھے, انہوں نے رائٹ فرام دا بگننگ, کہ جیسے بی بی نے ابھی ٹیک اوور ہی کیا ہے, اور سارک کانفرنس کو سیبوٹیج کرنے کے لیے. اور پھر سارک کانفرنس کے فوراً بعد الزام لگایا گیا کہ بی بی نے کیا کیا ہے کہ یہ سکھ ملیٹنٹس کی لسٹ جو ہے وہ دے دی ہے راجیو گاندھی کو. اس طرح کے الزامات لگایا گیا. تو یہ مطلب کوئی بھی جمہوری حکومت آنے کے فوراً بعد اس کو ناکام کرنے کی سازشیں شروع ہو جاتی ہیں, اور اس کی آئیڈیل ایگزامپل یہ سارک کانفرنس تھی جس کی طرف آپ نے اشارہ کیا. بابر صاحب, آپ کچھ ایڈ کرنا چاہ رہے ہیں؟
شکریہ جی. سب سے پہلے تو میں زاہد صاحب کو کمپلیمنٹ کرتا ہوں کہ 35-40 ڈسٹنگش لوگوں کے انٹرویو کیے ہیں, اور آئی ایم سوری دیٹ آئی مسڈ دیٹ پارٹ آف کنورسیشن جس پہ آپ نے حصہ لیا ہوگا طارق بنوری صاحب نے. آئی ہیو مسڈ سم تھنگ. یہ جو کتاب کے اوپر اور انٹرویوز کے بارے میں تو بات ہو گئی ہے، لیکن صاحب کتاب کے اوپر بھی ایک بات ہو جائے. اور یہ صاحب کتاب کے اوپر بات اس لیے بڑی ضروری ہے کہ اگر آپ کو پتہ لگ جائے کہ کتاب مارکیٹ میں آئی ہے تو پہلا سوال آپ کے ذہن میں ہوتا ہے کس نے لکھی ہے. ایک اخبار میں مضمون چھپتا ہے تو آپ کہتے ہیں کس نے لکھا ہے. اور جس شعبے سے میرا تعلق رہا ہے تو دیٹ ہیز آلویز بین اے کویسچن کہ بھئی کس نے لکھا ہے. اور ایسی بڑی خبریں ہوں گی کہ کسی کے بائی لائن سے چھپتی ہیں اور آپ کہتے ہیں چلے پڑھ لیں گے بھی ٹھیک ہے. اینڈ ایسی بھی خبریں ہوتی ہیں کہ وہی خبر ہوگی کسی اور نے لکھی ہوگی تو آپ بس دیکھو کیا کہا ہے. سو زاہد حسین بلانگس ٹو دیٹ کیٹیگری آف جرنلسٹ جن کے چیز لکھی ہوئی چیز کو ایگرلی پڑھا جاتا ہے تو دیٹ از ون آؤٹ اسٹینڈنگ. اور میں یہ اس لیے کہہ رہا ہوں کہ میرا چونکہ بے نظیر بھٹو کا بھی پریس اسسٹنٹ رہا، زرداری کا بھی رہا اور انفارمیشن میں بھی رہا، تو آئی ہیو اے ویو آف دس. اور وہ انہوں نے ایسے جرنلسٹ جو ان کی نظر میں آبجیکٹو تھے یا انٹلیکچولی انگیج ہو سکتے تھے تو ان کے ساتھ وہ شی آلویز ریسپیکٹڈ. تو زاہد حسین واز ون آف دیم. دیر ور کوائٹ اے فیو ادرز آلسو. دوسرا یہ ہے کہ یہ جو انٹرویوز ہیں آرڈینریلی ہم نے دیکھا ہے کہ ایسے بھی انٹرویوز ہوتے ہیں کہ جی وہ سوال ہو گیا جواب ہو گیا. شی سیڈ دس، مین وائل شی سیڈ دس اینڈ شی آلسو سیڈ دیٹ، اینڈ دیٹ ڈز ناٹ کنٹیکسچوئلائز دا ہول تھنگ. تو وہ بڑا ڈرائی سا لگتا ہے کہ وہ اچھا اس نے یہ بات کی، میں نے یہ بات کی، میں نے یہ پوچھا. تو کنٹیکسچوئلائز کرنا انٹرویو کو یہ بہت کم لوگ کرتے ہیں. یہ زاہد حسین نے یہ بھی کیا ہے کہ اس کو کہ بھئی ایمبینس کیا تھا وہ ماحول. اور تیسرا یہ ہے کہ میں نے دیکھا ہے کہ ہمارے بہت سارے جرنلسٹ، گریٹ رسپیکٹ ٹو آل آف دیم، ان کا جو انٹرویو کا جو سوال و جواب کا انداز ہوتا ہے وہ اٹ ٹرنز آؤٹ ٹو بی این ایکریمونیس کراس ایگزامینیشن. کہ آپ نے فرض کیا بات کی، میں جھٹ سے او ناظر صاحب کیا بات کرتے اس دن تو آپ نے یہ بات کی تھی. اٹ بیکمز این ایکریمونیس کراس ایگزامینیشن اینڈ دا ریئل تھنگ از لاسٹ ان دا ڈسکشن. تو یہ جو ایبلٹی ہوتی ہے جب آپ کسی سے گفتگو کر رہے ہو تو دی ایبلٹی ٹو لسن ایز ٹو واٹ از ہی سیئنگ، یہ بڑے کم لوگوں میں ہوتی ہے. آئی تھنک that Zahid also passes that test. He may not have passed it in a very high degree, لیکن پاس کیا ہے اس نے وہ ٹیسٹ. تو یہ
ریزرویشن کے ساتھ ٹھیک ہے.
بٹ آئی ٹیل یو دس آئی کین سے فار دس.
تھینک یو.
اور یہ جو ہے ان طرح کی کتابوں کا جو سب سے بڑا فائدہ ہے وہ یہی ہے کہ آپ کی تاریخ کے ساتھ پتہ لگ جاتا ہے کہ امپورٹنٹ تھنگ ریئلی ناظر صاحب یہ ہے کہ واٹ آر دا ہوپس، ٹو برنگ آؤٹ دا ہوپس اینڈ دا فیئرز ان دا مائنڈز آف دا لیڈرز بائی کنٹیکسچولائزنگ دوز تھنگ. آپ ایک نقشہ کھینچتے ہو کہ اس کے اندر جو خوف ہے وہ کیا ہے اور اس کے اندر جو امیدیں ہیں وہ کیا ہیں، اینڈ واٹ شی اور ہی وانٹس ٹو ڈو اینڈ از انیبل ٹو ڈو. تو یہ اس کتاب کا اور اس طرح کی دوسری کتابوں کے انٹرویوز کا تو آئی تھنک دیز آر ویلیویبل بکس اینڈ آئی کمپلیمنٹ ہم. تھینک یو.
شکریہ بابر صاحب. جی آپ ان کو مائک دے دیں تو وہ جی.
ایک نقطہ جس کی طرف اشارہ ہوا تھا اس پہ تھوڑی مزید روشنی ڈالیں کہ جس طرح آج کے زمانے میں ہم دیکھتے ہیں کہ آزادی رائے پر مختلف قوانین کے ذریعے، پیکا جیسے قوانین کے ذریعے یا ماورائے قانون قدغن لگانے کی کوشش کرتے ہیں، سلب کرنے کی کوشش کرتے ہیں. تو اس زمانے میں اس زمانے پر یہ اس کتاب کا میجر حصہ مشتمل ہے. جس زمانے میں آپ نے صحافت کی 80s کا دور کہیں یا ماشاء اللہ کے دور میں کس حد تک ایک صحافی کس ایکسٹینٹ سے وہ اپنی جو چیزیں ہیں وہ پبلش کرا سکتے تھے یا کس حد تک اس کو کمپرومائز کرنا پڑتا تھا. تھینک یو.
یہ بات صحیح ہے کہ جو ضیاء کا زمانہ جو تھا وہ اصلاح سے بدترین تھا کہ پاکستان کی تاریخ میں صحافت بہت آزاد نہیں رہی ہے. ہر دور میں کچھ نہ کچھ پابندیاں ہوتی رہی ہیں قانون بھی بنتے رہے ہیں. لیکن اس زمانے میں ایک نیا چیز بنی تھی پری سینسرشپ, کہ جو ہے شروع کی بات تھی کہ جو ہے کہ اخبار چھپنے سے پہلے پریس ڈپارٹمنٹ جاتا تھا اور اس کے بعد جو ہے اس میں طے کرتے تھے وہ جو بھی آفیسر ہوتے تھے کہ کیا چیز چھپ سکتی ہے کیا نہیں. تو اکثر اخباروں میں وہ بلینک پہ وہ آتے اسپیسز ہوتی تھی. لیکن اس میں ایک اور بات میں ہمیشہ سے کہتا ہوں کہ 1980s جب بدترین قسم کی ایک لحاظ سے وہ تھی, ایک ڈکٹیٹرشپ تھی, لیکن وہ پیریڈ میرے لیے بہت اہم اس لیے سمجھتا ہوں کہ وہ ریزسٹنس کا پیریڈ تھا. ایک ریزسٹنس میڈیا ڈیولپ ہو کے آئی تھی, اور میں شاید اگر اپنی اس کی وجہ سے نہیں کہہ رہا ہوں, آئی تھنک بینگ جرنلزم اور ابھی بھی ہوں, مجھے لگتا ہے کہ اس وقت کی جرنلزم جو تھی اسے پاکستان کی تاریخ میں اس کی کم مثال ملتی ہے. یعنی یہ جب آپ ان حالات میں وہ جو چیز لکھ پاتے ہیں اور اس میں جو ہے پھر اس کی چیز نظر کر آتی ہے. اب یہ ہیرلڈ کی بات تھی, ٹھیک ہے, وہ تھے ہم نے ایک چیز تھی کہ اس حد تک ہم لوگوں نے آزادی حاصل کر لی تھی کہ چیزیں چھپتی طریقے. اب وہ جو بات آ رہی تھی کہ جو ابھی طارق نے بھی بات کی تھی کہ بہت سارے انٹرویوز جو ہیں وہ ایک لحاظ سے ریئیکٹیو, لوگوں اس حالات کو ریئیکشن تھا ان کا کہ ان کے ساتھ کیا ہوا کیا نہیں ہوا. تو دیٹ آلسو شوز کہ ہم نے اس کے اس حالات اسی پرٹیکولر اسی لیے انٹرویو کرتے تھے تاکہ وہ جو وائسز ہیں اس کو سامنے لائی جا سکے. تو وہ ہم کر لیتے تھے. ہیرلڈ تھا اس زمانے میں نکلتا تھا, تو تھوڑا سا دباؤ کم تھا ہم پہ بنسبت اردو پیپرز کے, کیونکہ ان کا خیال یہ تھا کہ انگریزی کا جو ہے شاید لوگ نہیں پڑھتے ہوں گے اتنے. لیکن خیر, لیکن اس کے باوجود ہم بہت کچھ لکھ جاتے تھے. لیکن اب ہیرلڈ کی مینجمنٹ جو تھی وہ اس میں تو ہم پہ ایک چیز خالی لگی ہوئی تھی کہ آپ بے نظیر کی تصویر نہیں چھاپیں گے کور پہ, مطلب باقی اندر چھاپ دیں سب کچھ. تو اس میں یہ تھا کہ جب 84 میں جب ان کو باہر بھیجا جا رہا تھا وہ میڈیکل ہیلتھ گراؤنڈ پہ, اس وقت سے پہلے تو میرا خیال ہاؤس اریسٹ پہ تھی, تو اس میں سب سے بڑی اسٹوری تھی جو ہم نے میرے خیال میں نے نہیں کی تھی, کسی اور نے اسٹوری کی تھی. خیر, تو اس میں پھر یہ آیا کہ نہیں آپ ان کو کور پہ ڈالیں گے, اندر جو کچھ بھی لکھا تھا لکھے. تو اس میں پھر یہ تھا کہ ایک دکھایا تھا کہ ایک کوئی ایک خاکہ سا بنایا ہوا تھا کہ کوئی جہاز پہ چڑھ رہا ہے. اس کے بعد جو ہے مجھے یاد ہے کہ 86 میں سب سے بڑا جو ہے تھا جب بینظیر واپس آئی تھیں, ایک انٹرنیشنل خبر تھی, تو میں نے انٹرویوز بھی کیا تھا, آئی واز آلسو کورڈ سارا ان کی. تو وہ اسٹوری سے آگے پھر وہی سوال آیا کہ بے نظیر تو کور پہ نہیں ہوں گی. تو اس میں طے یہ ہوا تھا کہ جو ہے وہ بیچ میں تصویر ڈالی جائے گی اور 4 انسگنیفیکنٹ لیڈر جو وہ بھی ہوں گے اس وقت کے جتنے بھی تھے. تو وہ ایک کمپرومائز سا ہو جاتا تھا, باقی تمام چیز چھپ گئی تھی اندر تو ہے. تو مجھے اچھی طرح یاد ہے جب بے نظیر نے اوتھ لیا تھا تو میں بھی تھا جب ٹیکنگ سیریمنی میں, تو میں نے کہا کانگریچولیشن. تو انہوں نے کہا ایم آئی آن دا کور آف ہیرلڈ. میں نے کہا نو یو آر آلریڈی دیئر. تو دیٹ واز ہوتی. لیکن میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ اگر آپ دیکھیں تو اس سے آپ کے ریزسٹنس کی ایک نظر. تو میں جو اس کانٹیکس سے بات کر رہا تھا کہ اس انٹرویوز کو کانٹیکس میں دیکھیں کہ کن حالات میں لوگ یہ باتیں کر رہے تھے. اب فخر امام کی جو بات کی تھی, ان اینی کیس کیا ایک اسپیکر کو انٹرویو کریں, میرا خیال نہیں اس میں تھا, بٹ بیسیکلی ایک مقصد تھا کہ ایک ایسا ایک اسپیکر جس نے ڈیفیٹ جا کے جو ہے اس کو ڈیفیٹ کیا, یا اس کو جونیجو انٹرویو واز ویری انٹرسٹنگ ایکچولی. اس میں جو ہے اس نے ساری باتیں کی. تو یہ ہم نے سارا کچھ حاصل کیا تھا. اور میرا خیال یہ ہے کہ کانٹیکس بہت ضروری ہے. جب آپ کسی چیز کو پڑھیں تو ہسٹوریکل اور پولیٹیکل کانٹیکس آپ کے لیے بہت ضروری ہے جاننے کے. لیکن آپ اس کو آئسولیشن میں دیکھیں گے تو آپ کو بہت ساری چیزیں عجیب سی لگیں گی. بٹ
چلیں ایک آخری سوال لے لیتے ہیں, 2, ایک آپ سے اور ایک آپ سے. مائک کس کے پاس ہے؟ آپ کے پاس ہے فیصل.
شکریہ.
اس کے بعد ان کو دے دیجیے گا, حسن عمر کو. جی آپ فرمائیے.
سر بہت شکریہ. ایک کمنٹ چاہیے دونوں صاحبان سے, طارق صاحب سے بھی. اور عمومی طور پہ ہم پولیٹیشنز کو ریفارمسٹ بھی سمجھتے ہیں, ڈسپلنڈ بھی ہم کہتے ہیں ہونا چاہیے, وہ انہیں بولنا بھی اچھا آنا چاہیے, وہ بہت بڑی کتابیں بھی انہیں پڑھنی چاہیے, ایجوکیٹڈ بھی ہونا چاہیے. پولیٹیشنز کا ایک اس طرح کا تاثر بٹھا دیا گیا ہے کہ وہ جناب کانفیڈنس ہوتا نہیں, کیپیبلٹی ہوتی نہیں ہے. میں صرف یہ جاننا چاہتا ہوں کہ ڈیموکریسی میں جو ول آف پبلک ہے, لوگوں کی رائے کے اوپر, اس کی کتنی کا اہمیت ہے پاور کوریڈور میں؟ کبھی ول آف پاور اگر لوگوں نے اسے ووٹ دیا ہے, یہ انف نہیں ہے, اسے ریفارمسٹ ہونا چاہیے اور فل آف کانفیڈنس ہونا چاہیے اور کتابیں پڑھی ہونی چاہیے, ہسٹورین ہونا چاہیے. یہ سارا کچھ مل کے ایک ایمبینس کریٹ کر دیتا ہے کہ وہ نااہل ہیں. جب یہ ہو جاتا ہے تو وی گیو پلیس ٹو پیپل ہو آر ان دیٹ کیٹیگریز مور ایڈوانس بٹ دے ڈونٹ ہیو دا کانفیڈنس آف دا پیپل.
ٹھیک ہے,
بس میری یہ کائنڈلی.
بنوری صاحب آپ جواب دینا چاہیں گے؟ ایک ایک کر کے, اب 2 ہی سوال ہیں نا, ایک اس کا دے دیں پھر آخری سوال لے لیں گے. آپ کہنا چاہیں گے یا آپ سے؟
دیکھیں یہ کہیں بھی نہیں کہا جا رہا ہے کہ کسی کو یہ ہونا چاہیے. یہ بالکل آپ کی بات صحیح ہے کہ ول آف دا پیپل, ایک مینڈیٹ کی بات ہوتی ہے. جب الیکشن ہوتے ہیں تو یہ تو عوام کا مسئلہ ہوتا ہے کہ جو ہے کس کو الیکٹ کریں اور پھر اس کو جانا چاہیے. مقصد یہ نہیں تھا کہ جو ہے جیسے آپ نے شاید نواز شریف کی بات کی, یہ میری ایک آبزرویشن تھی اس کے بارے میں کہ یہ جو ہے ٹھیک نظر ہے. اٹ ڈز ناٹ مین کہ ہی شوڈ ناٹ بی گیون پاور اف ہی از الیکٹڈ بائی دا پیپل. یہ نہیں تھا. اصل بات وہی آتی تھی کہ آپ جیسے میں نے غفار خان کی بات کی تو میں اس میں کبھی پاور بھی نہیں آیا وہ تھے, تو اس کی جو میری آبزرویشن تھی ان کے بارے میں وہ بیان کیا ہے. مطلب اس سے لوگ ڈفر بھی کر سکتے ہیں, لیکن یہ بات آپ کی صحیح ہے کہ پاکستان کا جو مسئلہ ہے جو پورے 75 سال میں بلکہ اگر دیکھا جائے تو بہت مشکل سے جو ہے کبھی ول آف دا پیپل جو ہے تسلیم کیا گیا ہے, کبھی بھی نہیں ہوا. اور میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ یہی چیز ریفلیکٹ ہوتی ہے اس انٹرویو میں کہ جو ہے جب آپ کو اگر فرض کیجیے حالات ایسے ہوتے ہیں جہاں پہ ایک آئیڈیل ڈیموکریسی ہوتی ہے, آپ کو لوگوں کو اپنے حقوق ملے ہوتے, تو شاید انٹرویو کے جو ہے الفاظ دوسرے ہوتے اور ان کی جو ہے جو پھر وہ بات کرتے کیسے بہتر چیزوں کو کیا جا سکے. لیکن وہی چیز ہے کہ جب آپ کے پاس بنیادی حقوق نہیں ملیں گے تو لوگ پھر اس کی بات ہی کریں گے کہ اس کو کس طرح سے حقوق سلب کیے گئے. بالکل صحیح بات ہے کہ ابھی بھی دیکھا جائے تو اس الیکشن کو بھی آپ دیکھیں تو ول آف پیپل تو کہیں پہ بھی نظر نہیں آتی. اس سے پہلے بھی ہے میرے خیال چند ہی ایک آدھ الیکشن جہاں پہ ہوں گے کہ ول آف پیپل کو ایک حد تک اجازت دی گئی لیکن اس کو تسلیم تو بھی نہیں کیا گیا. جہاں بہت زیادہ بات ہوتی ہے کہ 1970 کے الیکشن بہت وہ تھے, بالکل ٹھیک تھے ہوئے, اور جب اس کے نتائج نکلے تو آپ کو کیا تسلیم کیا گیا تھا؟ اس کو نہیں تسلیم کیا گیا تھا. 1990 کا الیکشن اگر میں اس کو کور کیا تھا, مائی گاڈ, اس کو اگر تو آپ ساری چیزیں آتی ہیں کہ کس طرح سے ISI نے IGI بنائی اور کس طرح سے پیسے بھی تقسیم کیے گئے, اور پیسے لینے والوں میں بہت سارے ایسے تو جو بعد میں اقتدار میں آئے.
بالکل. بنوری صاحب,
جو ایک کانسیپٹ آپ سمجھ لیں پبلک سروس, اس کے کئی دروازے ہیں. جیسے اب جوڈیشری ہے تو اس کو جو ہے وہ ایک طریقہ ہے کہ آپ کی ایکسپرٹیز اور سلیکشن پروسیس ہوگا. بیوروکریسی ہے, اس کا علیحدہ طریقہ ہے. فوج ہے, تو یہ نہیں ہو سکتا کہ آپ آج جو آپ نے دکان لگائی ہوئی اگلے دن آپ کو جرنیل لگا دیا جائے گا. یو ہیو ٹو کم تھرو دا سسٹم. الیکشنز از اندر وے. تو الیکشنز میں کوئی ایکسپرٹیز, knowledge of history, these are not the requirements. The only requirement is that you should come through the elections, right? In other areas, اگر آپ نے پل بنانا ہے یا ہسپتال میں آپریشنس کرنے ہیں, you need expertise. That is also a public service. یہ جو زاہد کام کر رہے ہیں, this is also a public service. He needs expertise, and the only way of testing it is whether people read his articles or not. اگر ان کے مضامین لوگ پڑھیں گے تو he is مور ہائیلی ویلیوڈ, اگر نہیں پڑھیں گے تو چاہے کچھ بھی ہیں وہ نہیں ہے. تو یہ کئی مختلف طریقے, سو اس میں کوئی وہ مسئلہ نہیں ہے. ان کے اوپر میرا خیال میں کہ کہ ہماری تاریخ جیسی ہے, زاہد نے بھی بتا دی, لیکن ہمارے پاس پرابلم یہ ہے کہ ہم ان سب فارمز آف پبلک سروس کو ایک ہارمنی میں لے آئیں. یہاں پہ لوگ جو ہیں, چونکہ وہ ایک فیوڈل اسٹرکچر سے ہم لوگ نکلے ہیں, people like to think in terms of hierarchies. These are not hierarchies. Somebody may be a judge, somebody else may be a journalist, somebody may be a minister. Nobody says this, or nobody should say that this man or this woman is superior to them. Everybody is performing public service in their own rights. Once we get to that point, I think we will be able to create much greater harmony in our system. At this moment, there is no harmony in our system because we want to put everything in BPS 1 to 17 and 22 and thereon. This is not the way our society functions.
تھینک یو. آخری سوال جی حسن ہوا.
سر انہی شخصیات میں سے وہ کون سی شخصیت تھی جس سے آپ انٹرویو لینے کے بعد اس نے کہا یہ ایسا شامل کر دیں اور یہ ایسا کاٹ دیں, اور انہی شخصیات میں سر وہ کون سی شخصیت تھی
اچھا سوال.
آپ انٹرویو لینے سے پہلے سوچا اس سے مشکل سوال کرنے اور کیوں کرنے, یہ بتا دیجیے گا.
دیکھیے مجھے یاد نہیں پڑتا ہے کہ میں کسی کو کوئی مجھ سے کہے کہ آپ اس کو شامل کریں اور میں نہ شامل کروں, اس کو میں شامل نہ کروں. میرے خیال ایسا کوئی بھی نہیں ہوا, اور جس نے یہ کہا بھی کہ اس کو شامل نہیں کریں وہ بھی آگے اس انٹرویو میں. میرے خیال عمران خان نے شاید کہا تھا کیپٹن کے مطلب وہ کہ بی سی بی کا چیئرمین کس کو ہونا چاہیے, تو اس نے ایک جواب دیا کہ جاوید برقی کو. پھر میں نے ایک سوال کیا کہ واٹ اباؤٹ حنیف محمد, تو اس کے بعد شروع کیا اس نے کہا اس کو ہٹا دیں وہ, لیکن وہ اس انٹرویو میں آ گیا ہے کہ اس کو ہٹا دیں. تو میں یعنی کبھی اس کوئی دقت نہیں ہوئی کہ مجھے کوئی سوال کروں یا نہ کروں. میں خیال یہ کہ جتنی کھل کے میں نے سوال کیے ہیں تو جتنی بھی میں کوئی اپنی وہ نہیں کرتا ہوں, لیکن جو اپنی بھی استعداد کہہ لیں یا جو بھی میری سوچ تھی اس کے لحاظ سے, تو مجھے کبھی بھی یہ نہیں ہوا کہ یہ بات صحیح تھی جیسے فضل اللہ بار صاحب کہ میرا مقصد یہ کبھی بھی نہیں تھا کہ کسی کو کٹہرے میں لے آئیں. یہ ضرور ہے کہ جب آپ سوال کرتے ہیں تو آپ ان ہر چیز کے بارے میں سوال کریں جو کہ غلط آپ سمجھتے تھے کہ ہوئی ہے, تو اس کو بھی آپ کنفرنٹ کر سکتے ہیں. لیکن دو طریقے سے انٹرویوز ہوتے ہیں, میں اس پہ جاتا ہوں. ایک تو یہ تھا کہ ہمارے یہ ہوتی ہے کہ جو ہے لوگوں کی ایک پروجیکشن سی کی جائے, اور ایک شارٹ انٹرویو جیسے ہوتا ہے نا کہ آپ نے کسی حکمران کو کیا تو اس کا ایک اس کے پیچھے ایک مقصد ہوتا ہے. اور دوسرا یہ ہوتا ہے کہ آپ اس کو ایک چیز کریں, ایک بیلنس ضرور ہونا چاہیے کہ آپ کسی سوال کو یہ نہیں کریں کہ جو آپ کے ذہن میں یا پبلک میں سوالات آ رہے ہیں اس کو نہ کریں. میں نہیں سمجھتا ہوں کہ کرنا چاہیے, لیکن اس کو ایک ہوتا ہے کہ آپ کے پاس خود بھی سبسٹینس ہونا چاہیے. جتنا جو ہے آپ انٹرویو دینے والے سے امید کرتے ہیں اس سے زیادہ امید ہونی چاہیے کہ جو انٹرویو لینے والا ہے اس کو بھی کچھ بیک گراؤنڈ اس کے پاس پتہ ہو. کوئی انٹرویو ایسا نہیں ہے جس کو آپ تیاری کے بغیر اگر کر لے جا کے. میں جو اچھی طرح یاد ہے کہ جب بھی میں انٹرویو کرتا تھا تو اس کے لیے تیاری کر کے باقاعدہ ریسرچ کرنے کے بعد جو ہے کرتا تھا, اور وہی بات تھی کہ اصل مقصد وہی تھا. اور میرے خیال میں تھوڑا سا آخری جملہ میرا کہ انٹرویو کا مقصد یہ تھا کہ ایک چیز جو اجاگر کرنی تھی ریزسٹنس کو, اینڈ دیٹس وائی ایکچولی موسٹ آف دا انٹرویوز آر فرام دا اپوزیشن.
جی تھینک یو ویری مچ ایوری ون. بہت اچھا لگا آپ سے بات کر کے, اور ہماری معلومات میں بھی اضافہ ہوا. کتاب خریدنا نہ بھولیے گا جانے سے پہلے. تھینک یو.